Well, welcome. My name's Dwayne Price. I'm the MC for this afternoon's event. I'm with the Arnprior Airport, and on behalf of the entire airport team, we are honored that you're here today. We're very proud of this airport and its rich history and very bright future. So, along with our special guests here today that I'll be introducing in a moment, we're very pleased to have Vintage Wings. And this is Vintage Wings Canada. They're here with us today. They have placed 5 period aircraft on display outside, and I know that you've all been walking around taking a look at them. Huge thank you to Don Buchan and Vintage Wings of Canada for sharing these period aircraft with us here today. In addition to Vintage Wings and their static display, we are pleased to share that we have representation here from the Bomber Command Museum of Canada. The Bomber Command Museum of Canada is an aviation museum located in Nanton, Alberta. The museum opened in 1986 and was founded to protect and restore the Avro Lancaster, one of only 17 remaining in the world. Mr. Knox, Mr. Lynch, thank you. I'd like to talk about our special guests. From the Royal Canadian Air Force, Deputy Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, Major General Colin Keever. Royal Canadian Air Force Headquarters, Chief Warrant Officer, Brent Boutelier. And Special Advisor to the Commander, RCAF, Retired General Scott Bowden. Welcome. From the Woolings family, Laurice and Douglas Wooling. These are Russ Bannock's close friends that donated the Russ Bannock plaque to the Arnprior Airport. They have 3 daughters with them here today. The daughter and son-in-law, Lori and Kevin Costello, both pilots, and they provided Doug and Laurice their air transportation to the airport today. Their daughter and son-in-law, Michelle and Shane McGee, the primary organizers of this event, and their daughter, Jillian Dalton. Welcome. From Arnprior, the Honourable Mayor of Arnprior, Walter Stack, and Town Councillor and Arnprior Airport Commission Chair, Ted Strike. Welcome. Please join me in welcoming Honourable Mayor Walter Stack.
So good afternoon, and to start off with, today is the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, Orange T-shirt Day. So if you would, I would first like to start by acknowledging that the land on which we work and gather is a traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Bay people. This Algonquin nation has lived in this land for thousands of years, long before the arrival of European settlers, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. Forever and a day, it will be a feather in our cap that the Saviour of London and the President of the Havilland Aircraft Company and Bannock Aerospace spent years as the Chief Instructor at Arnprior Airport No. 3 Flying School. Today we talk about becoming a person of influence with young people. With the stories I've read in the Toronto Sun, the Globe and Mail, and Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame, and the Canadian Bush Plane Heritage Centre, Mr. Bannock could have written that book. The fact that his family and friends and representatives of the Royal Canadian Air Force are here today to recognize his time in Arnprior is a testament to the influence he had in all facets of his life. So in closing, on behalf of members of Council and the residents of the town of Arnprior, I sincerely thank you for recognizing his history with the Arnprior Airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Stack. I'd like to welcome and thank Douglas and Laurice Woolings and their family who are here today and have generously donated the plaque to the Arnprior Airport. Douglas Wooling was the founder, president, and chief executive officer of Interfast Incorporated, a role that he served from 1966 to 2012. During his career, Doug served on several boards, including his past role as Director of Aerospace Industries Association of Canada and the Director of the Ontario Aerospace Council. He has also maintained his private pilot's license for over 60 years. He has logged thousands of hours traveling both for work and for pleasure, specifically up to both Russ Bannock and Douglas's beloved fishing camp, Cognawana. As a private pilot and as a businessman, Doug spent many years using the Arnprior Airport. During the Interfast years, he would travel here to call upon Boeing Arnprior on a regular basis. Very good friends with Russ Bannock and the Bannock family. Mr. Willings, it has been my pleasure to have gotten to know your daughter Michelle and her husband Shane over this past year. They have been working on this project over the last year to make this day happen. Michelle, please join us to say a few words on behalf of your father.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. Today I'm here with my father, Douglas Willings, and I'm going to be speaking on his behalf. We're so happy to be able to be here today to honor Russell Bannock and unveil the plaque that has been created in his honor and donated to the Arnprior Airport by my parents, Douglas and Larice Willings. My father wanted to take this opportunity to pay tribute to someone who was such a good friend to him for over 50 years. During that time, they golfed together, played tennis together, and they've shared many flying and fishing adventures. When Russ celebrated his 100th birthday in November of 2019, my father was unable to attend the celebration as he was in the hospital battling his own health issues. To give you an idea of what a great friend Russ was, throughout the very long hospital stay, at the ages of 99 and 100, Russ was a frequent visitor of my father. My dad's doctors and nurses all fell in love with him instantly. He was a charming and beautiful soul. People were drawn to him if they could keep up with him. But not only was Russ visiting my father on a regular basis, but this is just who Russ was, but Russ was also regularly visiting the veterans in the Veterans Wing at Sunnybrook Hospital. And he was a regular there to show his support. He was an amazing man who at 100 was so full of life and energy. And he was also a loyal and kind friend to so many, including many of you that are here today. When Russ passed away in 2020, my father was still in the hospital and so sad to be unable to attend his funeral. At this time, he asked me to help him to do something to celebrate Russ and honor his achievements and his service to Canada. He wanted to recognize a part of Russ's history at a place that was also familiar to him, the Arnprior Airport. My father used to travel here for business when he visited Boeing Arnprior. By donating the plaque to this airport, we're acknowledging the important role that both Russ and the Arnprior Airport played during World War II. Russ trained instructors here as part of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. Before we unveil a copy of the plaque, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone to help this day to happen. Dwayne and your team, for all you have done for today. You've done so much work. And you introduced us to Randy Yakmichuk from Moonlit Signs, along with Craig Wewand from Out West Designs, who designed and created this beautiful plaque. Mike Bannock, I know you're not here today, but Mike was instrumental in helping as well, getting all the information, helping me find all the information on his father, And he also introduced us to a really great writer, the talented historian from Canadian Aviation's Hall of Fame, Jonathan Scotland, who wrote everything on the plaque. My sisters, Lori and Jill, you guys pulled together to make everything happen. And to my husband, Shane, thanks for your great help planning this day. General Howden, all your conversations and your continued support and your wisdom and your kind words are much appreciated. Don Buchan, for your support with Vintage Wings. We're so honored to have all of these beautiful aircraft here today. And Ken Laver and Jim Sawyer, thank you so much for helping me to even get this started. And thank you to all of you who are here today and everyone who helped make this day happen. The plaque is hanging in the terminal right now. Please go in at your leisure after the speakers are done and have a look at it. Here we've got a copy of the plaque for the purposes of unveiling and being outside. Dad, do you want to help unveil it? Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. I'd like to take a moment now and introduce our last speaker for this evening, Deputy Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, Major General Colin Keever. I'm going to just talk about him for a minute. Major General Keever, raised on a family farm in Alberta, was very active with the Air Cadets, following 4 years in the primary reserve as an infantry officer with the Calgary Highlanders. Colin joined the RCAF in 1991, receiving his wings in 94, which was the beginning of a long relationship, a very long relationship with the C-130 Hercules. Colin, heavily involved with the C-130, had the honor of delivering the final C-130J to Trenton. Last flight, July 12th, 2017.
Thanks for reminding me.
That marked the finishing of his tour as the 8-wing commander in Trenton. Colin was deployed extensively during his career, including Sudan, as the Air Operations Advisor to the African Union. Promoted first to the rank of Brigadier General in April of 2018, and then Brigadier General Keever was appointed Director General Air Force Development July 2019. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he was especially proud to oversee the rapid delivery of projects such as aeromedical biocontainment evacuation system to support Canadians at home and abroad. He was promoted to his current rank and assumed the role and responsibility of the Deputy Commander, Royal Canadian Air Force in May of this year. Major General Keever has a degree in political science, a master's in defense studies concurrent with completing the Joint Command and Staff program, and is a graduate of the Royal College of Defense Studies in London. He has almost 5,000 hours of flight time in the C-130. We'll have a C-130 in this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Commander of the Royal Canadian Air Force, Major General Colin Keever.
Oh, I hate long intros. Thank you, Dwayne. Seriously, thanks for the words. No one is more surprised than my mother that I stand here today as Deputy Commander of the Air Force. Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, first and foremost, let me say a sincere thank you to Michelle and Shane and Dwayne and everyone else in putting this together. It is an exceptional opportunity, and on behalf of the Royal Canadian Air Force, a sincere thank you for letting us be involved. It is that important to us. Folks from Vintage Wings, thank you for bringing those awesome airplanes. It's awesome to be around airplanes. Even just the smell of them is amazing. My mother-in-law doesn't think so, but I do, so I sincerely thank you for that. And to your very kind efforts to honor your friend Russ, thank you sincerely, sir. I want to speak briefly about Russ in the sense that I did not know him as well as some in this room, but I did have the honor to interact with him on occasion. And I think it's important to note that from an Air Force perspective, Russ was a licensed pilot before the war began on the 1st September 1939. And Russ was telling me that it was on about the 3rd or 4th of September that he received a registered letter from the Royal Canadian Air Force inviting him to be a pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And what's important to note about Russ is that we know Russ was an extremely gifted aviator because the minute he got into the Air Force, he was rapidly made an instructor down at the Central Flying School in Trenton. And in the Air Force during those early years of the war, we kept the best home to be instructors. We didn't send them overseas. And then the best of the best ended up teaching others how to instruct, which is what brought Russ here to Arnprior at Flight Instructor School, prior to finally being allowed to go overseas in 1944. And Russ was clearly a leader because he wasn't just instructing instructors. He was a flight commander at the Central Flying School in Trenton, which was the heart of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan in terms of standards and procedures and the way we taught. And then the commanding officer up here at the Flying Instructor School. But then very rapidly he went overseas, rolled into 418 Squadron as a flight commander initially, rapidly got promoted, became the commanding officer of 418 Squadron, and by November of 1944 had moved across to another field where he became the commanding officer of 406 Squadron. And it's significant to note that Russ was clearly a leader overseas as well. He commanded 2 squadrons in operations, and by the end of the second tour, the 2 squadrons that he commanded, 418 and 406, respectively, were number 1 and number 2 highest scoring night fighter squadrons in the Royal Canadian Air Force. I don't think that's a coincidence. It's probably highly attributable to the person that Russ was and the way he led. To the point that by the end of the war, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Order by the King for his leadership. An exceptional individual. And I want to relate a personal story that Russ shared with me to give you an idea of the individual that he was. He was telling me that when he finally got to go overseas, and they put him in charge of 418 Squadron, he thought life was great. He was getting to get into an airplane with his good friend and navigator regularly and go off and do what they wanted to do and needed to do. And he was quite loving it. But as he put it, he'd probably done too good a job at 418 Squadron because in late October 1944, the Royal Canadian Air Force Overseas Headquarters brought Russ down to London and said, "Russ, we've got a new job for you. We have a squadron that has just converted to the Mosquito that is a nightmare. And we need someone to go in there and fix it. And not only do we need someone to go in there and fix it, you've got a month to do it, and if you don't get it done, you're all going home." And Russ was a little daunted by this task. So Russ told me that he got on the train out of London, he went up to Manston, which is where 406 Squadron was based, his new command. He got in at about noon, 1 o'clock on a Sunday, he said, into the station. And he could find nobody. He did not know where anybody was. There was nobody that came to greet him, which he interpreted as the first warning sign, given that the new boss had just rolled in town and no one seemed to care. So he wandered around the station, and finally he came across the officers' mess where it was clear there was a little bit of an event going on in the officers' mess. And he told me that he walked into the officers' mess, and the first thing he noticed when he walked into the officers' mess were all the officers' forage caps in their pigeonholes in the cloakroom of the mess. And none of them had the band in the top of the forage cap that keeps the forage cap sitting upright. And he said that by 1944, the Royal Canadian Air Force had become a very professional organization. And when he saw that, he instantly knew that this was a unit that was in trouble. Because this had been something that had crept into the home defense squadrons in the UK in the early years of the war during the Battle of Britain as kind of a mark of honor. And they'd been trying to beat it out of the squadrons and actually get them to wear the forage cap right. So he said that was their first sign, and he said that the Royal Canadian Air Force was much more professional than that at that point in time, and it would just not tolerate that kind of bravado. So he went into the mess. He said it was like 1:30 in the afternoon. It was packed, and there was a major party going on a Sunday afternoon, which caused him some concerns. He said he went in, he had a pint, he interacted a little bit with everyone, and then he banged the wall, and he made an announcement just before he left the mess at about 3 in the afternoon. He said that there was going to be an all-hands meeting for all squadron personnel the next morning at 08. Please don't be late. So he went off, did his thing, had supper. He got up the next morning. He was in the squadron theater at 08. Everyone was there except for 3 individuals that were late. 2 pilots and a navigator. And he said he wasn't sure what he was going to do about them at that point in time, but whatever, they came in, and he said he spent about an hour reading the Riot Act, about how they were going to straighten up and they were going to become, an effective unit and get their mission done. And he admitted to me that candidly, he wasn't sure how much of an effect the meeting had actually had. But he said it was what he did after the meeting that had profound effects. And this just demonstrates the kind of leader Russ was. He went back to his office, thought about it, grabbed his adjutant, and cut orders to immediately send those 3 individuals back to Canada. And they were off the station before lunch that day, headed back to Canada with their bags. And Russ said the last thing he'd done at the meeting on Monday was he'd announced that there was going to be another all ranks meeting at 08 on Tuesday. And he said to me, lo and behold, Colin, nobody was late for that meeting. They were all there. And then he goes, I realized I was onto something. And so then at the second meeting, I told them all to put their bands back into their forage caps. And he goes, when I went to the mess at lunch that day, every single forage cap had its band back in it and was being worn properly. And what was most striking about Russ was he was very humble about this, in the sense that, he didn't tell me about it to be boastful or demonstrate his prowess. And the comment he made about it that was most striking was he said, Colin, they were really good people. They just needed a little bit of direction and guidance. And that was my job to give it to them. And seriously, by the time, that was November 1944, by May 1945 and Victory in Europe Day, 406 Squadron had become, during that period, the highest scoring night fighter squadron in the Royal Canadian Air Force. And I have zero doubt that that is directly attributable to Russ and the type of person he was.